Well, I could not be more excited to be sitting here with the one and only Sean Astin. Sean, I promise that's the only time I'll refer to you in the third person today. I'm a huge movie lover. I'm such an enormous fan of yours, from Goonies to Encino Man, Rudy, Stranger Things, and of course Lord of the Rings. And we're definitely going to be talking about that today. And we're also going to be announcing a couple of live raffles today, and those folks are going to be getting some great signed items from you, Sean. So that's pretty exciting. But let me just stop and say, welcome, Sean. Thanks so much for being here. And how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks, Dave. It's great to be here. I feel perfectly at home. I'm excited to talk about my first uh, foray into tech, but it'll dovetail into the subject that I know you're going to bring up. So I'll wait for a minute. So call that a little hyping of my first the thing that makes me feel like I belong in this room.
Sean, we've also got you here to talk about a really important and very timely issue, which is mental health. And today, specifically, we're going to talk about mental health in the workplace. Why don't you just ask, what is your connection? Why have you become such an advocate for speaking about mental health?
Absolutely. As you were saying that, I was thinking about Lord of the Rings, and I was thinking about Samwise Gamgee and the trip to Mordor and the volcano and like getting a ride back on the eagle and in the clutches of the. I'm thinking, if Samwise Gamgee can't speak to mental health issues, I don't know. I don't know. Yeah, that was a traumatic work experience for him because he was doing his job following Mr. Frodo. But the reason I come at this subject matter is that my mother, who was a famous actress, she passed away in 2016. She was a beloved figure in the American television landscape over the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and she was diagnosed in the mid 80s with a bipolar mood condition. Once she was diagnosed, she became a champion for mental health advocacy, destigmatizing mental health and mental health awareness. And she wrote books, expert books on, Brilliant Madness was one of her books. She gave speeches all over the country, all around the world. She did movies about it. It was quite a harrowing experience growing up as the son of a person with bipolar. And then when Lord of the Rings came out in 2001, I started getting lots of calls from places who thought, like, here's somebody that the audience will relate to who had this family experience. So I meet at the nexus of kind of pop culture, engagement, and to answer your question, that's me. That's how I come at it.
This session may have raised some eyebrows when we announced it. Maybe it's still raising some eyebrows for some skeptics out there. I'll admit, when we even first started throwing around the idea of inviting you to speak at GitKon, beyond the sort of fellowship of code theme, the deeper connection maybe wasn't super obvious, right? An actor coming to talk about mental health with a group of software developers. But I think as we've been talking, we've even surprised ourselves with how much is similar between, your career and your environment and that of your community, and this community. And I want to just give you an opportunity to maybe share some of the things that have stood out to you about those similarities.
Yeah, I mean, this is a good launching off point. Since I talked about my mother and the nexus between my mother and tech, I remember that I was given for Christmas in 1978 or 9, maybe 1980. I want to say something with a 7 in front of it, a Commodore 64. So for anybody in the tech world, that's like the white whale, right? Or that's it's like a 57 Chevy or something like that. So I just want to feel that I want you to ease into this conversation, everybody. I want you to know that we have some affinity when it comes to the history of tech. Not to mention Pong. No, you know what? Here's the thing. Coming out of COVID, I don't think there's any place on earth where it isn't appropriate to start talking about mental health and mental illness and mental wellness, because we all went through a massive trauma. And I don't know if people think of it that way enough. We think of it as like, boy, what is 2020 was, it's like 3 years ago now. That's so 3 years ago. But this conversation would be relevant if we hadn't gone through a global pandemic, if we were just talking about our devices and TikTok and phones and, living in it. And you can almost hear the language that's used to talk about how we've become disconnected in our society, how video games or how, our screens, how much time we spend monitoring our screen, like that. I think we're almost numb to hearing that maybe this is having an impact on our consciousness and in our wellness. So we want to be heard. We want to be understood. And I think one of the ways that you can get at feeling understood is listening to somebody talk about something you may be experiencing yourself.
And so when you just think about your career as an actor, the kinds of projects that you've worked on, the positions you've put yourself in, can you talk for a minute about the kind of pressure maybe you felt yourself, whether you put it on yourself or you felt that pressure from your environment or the folks around you?
I would say the most stress that I feel in my professional life is trying to get the job, is before you have the job. That sense of like being on the treadmill and having to hustle and having to talk to the agents and talk to the managers. And there's almost like a dual track awareness where on the one hand, I'm in there fighting. I'm not getting this audition. I am getting an audition, but I wasn't prepared. I went in and screwed up the audition, whatever. And then there's this other track that's like, I belong. I belong here. I deserve to be here. And those two things, sometimes they meet, and it's a beautiful thing when they meet, when your hustle meets your sense of mission and purpose.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. Developers, their version of it might be that they work on a product that, needs to either go around their company and get buy-in, get approval, or it's going out into the public, right? And folks like you and I are playing with it. It's an app on our phone. It's a game. And they're getting feedback, right? And a lot of it can be really critical, especially in this day and age. And so, I hear from peers and colleagues talking about how I take it personally. I feel like it's a reflection on me personally, as opposed to the work that I did in my job. Do you have one or two tips on ways, if you've been successful at it at any points in your career, of like removing yourself from the work to not take that kind of feedback so personally?
Most of the time, when the environment exists, when there isn't a strike and we're able to be working and so forth, I find myself intentionally focusing on other things. Did a triathlon, went to grad school, got really involved in my union activities. And part of that was a way to inoculate myself from the vicissitudes of show business, where you're up, you're down, you're in, you're out. People, they're not looking for somebody like you right now, kind of a vibe. And it's like, well, that's cool. That's cool. It affects me. I'm excited or I'm bummed or whatever, but I have this other thing that I'm doing. I've made 2 movies that were about video game developers. And the hero of both movies was like an 18-year-old kid who was developing an independent game. It's just really interesting to me that wish fulfillment is now existing in this tech space, where society is looking at tech now the way you used to look at baseball, as this like untouchable thing that, you've got The Natural, or you've got these movies out there that with the music and the swelling and the everything. And if you can achieve, I did a movie about a football player, and his dream was to play football. Now kids are having dreams to develop video games and to be in tech, in the tech world. And I sort of feel like that should be a nice little coating that you can put over, a little salve that you can put over your anxiousness when you exist in that space.
I caught you on a recent podcast where it came up the subject of celebrities and fame, and there you shared this comment about the importance of knowing your way back to center, right? And I thought, wow, that's really that resonated with me, and I thought maybe there's a way to kind of apply that here in terms of knowing your way back. Anytime those thoughts are swirling, or you're feeling out of control, or that energy, that negative energy is building up around you or inside you, how do you know your way back to a healthier place?
So I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, I think that was the first time I conceptualized that, was like in that moment with that colleague of mine who we did that podcast with. Somehow I picture people in the tech world being numb a lot of the time. I don't know how you couldn't be when you spend so much time physically, like in your own pod or in your own cocoon of your computer and your mental life or whatever. If you feel it, just like identifying it, just being able to say, like, oh, wait a minute, I know this feeling. I know this numbness. I know this, for me, it's like racing thoughts, or hyperness. I'm so hyper, my legs are bouncing, and when I'm talking really fast, or I'm noticing my eating patterns, or my, consuming caffeine or whatever, sugar, or, and or not working out or working out. If you can at a certain point sort of go like, oh, wait a minute, like I recognize this. I recognize that this is a thing I experience. And then from that point where you recognize, like, you're on the outer rim of your own, I don't know, your own consciousness, your own joy, your own comfort, your own professionalism, whatever it is. And then you remember, like, I know what the sweet spot is. I know what the sweet spot of fulfillment is. I know what the sweet spot of focus is, where I'm not fighting so hard to stay focused. And I'm not so like there's a sweet spot. And if you can try and draw a line, and it probably takes a lifetime to master it, but a line from that thing that you note that is where you don't want to spend too much time, and the place where is a good spot for you to be. And you can, maybe even leave a trail of breadcrumbs for yourself on the way in or the way out, where you sort of go like, okay, this is generally halfway to that place I don't want to be, or this is generally halfway back. I don't know what that is for all the people who are watching this right now, what it is for them. But if they don't have it, if there isn't anything that they know to do to ride their way back to that place, or even what that centered place is, have faith that it's there. And I think part of it is being willing to look and not assume it doesn't exist. One of the dreams that we can have as workers, as beings, or whatever, is to find the place that does exist where I'm experiencing fulfillment. That place exists.
So many of the characters you've played have always been dreamers and eternal optimists. And I wonder what you might have to say about what some of your characters, and maybe it's Samwise, what he might have to say about this conversation.
The characters that I've played that people connect with the most, the thing that they all seem to have roughly in common is family. In one film, they want to find the treasure so they can save their family's home. In another movie, the kid wants to achieve this great thing with football, and the most important thing to him is that his dad knows, and that his dad comes and sees it, and then he can go home and show his dad his report card. In another one, in the epic trilogy, they're literally saving their home environment, the Shire. In a TV show with Demogorgons, I played a character who was creating a sense of home for the woman who had been terrorized for the whole first season when her children were in jeopardy, and he's just a nice guy, and he just comes and brings home to them, and home is him. Home is him. Home is how he wants to play puzzles, and how he just wants to sit and watch a movie and have a nice dance, and say, "I'll be here when you get home, kids," and help a kid out. So there's something about having something that's worth fighting for, having something that's worth preserving, at stake. And then whatever adventure, whatever quest, whatever task or journey or challenges are laid before you, there's the hard work of doing the thing, that I suppose no real achievement or satisfaction can happen if you aren't challenged. If you don't have something that's hard, then it was easy and you can kind of take it for granted. But if you do something that's hard, and it usually comes at some cost. I mean, that's what wisdom is. Wisdom comes from having navigated those challenges successfully or unsuccessfully, because they're not always going to be successful. And finding a way not to, how do you start over? How do you start? How do you start to find the next gig? How when it's failed? How when it's succeeded and there's nothing and you got how do you start? That's friggin' hard. That's hard. That is a recipe for mental exhaustion and emotional exhaustion.
That exhaustion is very present. We talk about burnout all the time. Folks that are just heads down, working on things, and sometimes it's really thankless. Doesn't always get praise, doesn't always get credit, and it's on to the next. What have you done for me lately? Can you relate? Have you ever felt burnout?
I think people must experience burnout as a failure. Like, I'm burned out, therefore there must be something deficient in me. F that. No way. If you're burned out, if you run a marathon, that's what's so great about marathons and triathlons and stuff. When you finish, you're so exhausted, but you're so exhilarated because you are burned out. Your legs are burned out. Your cardiovascular system is burned out, but you've achieved something. And there's a sense that you will recover, and there will be another marathon. There will be another triathlon to run. There'll be more triathlons they will outlive your lifetime, So that idea of burnout, I think the question becomes, do people feel like they earned that burnout, or the burnout happened because, or happened on them, or happened at them, caught up with them? Do you feel with burnout like until you physically cannot go anymore, your psychology and your body, mind, and spirit cannot go any further, you are burned out, then that's proof that you've done that you've you did it. Maybe it's better to recognize this mode I'm in right now, I'm gonna be burned out if I keep doing this. Is that burnout gonna be in the interest of something that I'm trying to achieve, or is it a habit? Understanding your relationship to your burnout, you can't hide from it. You can pretend it's not there. You can put blinders on, but it's happening. So developing some conscious relationship to your burnout mode when that happens, oh boy, that would seem to me a very useful skill. And the other last little thing I would just sort of throw out there, which is something I've never been that good at in life, but that's when you're thinking about other people.
I'm glad you brought up this notion of helping other people because there is this other side of the coin around a mental health conversation, which is that there is positive mental health. We've talked a lot about the negatives, and it's easy to focus on those challenging aspects of it, the burnout, and going into those dark places and feeling those feelings, tough personalities, what have you. But there's also that aspect of maybe you're creating something that's going to help other people, or maybe you're just helping one of your colleagues, accomplish a task, accomplish a goal. There's pride, there's accomplishment, there's self-realization, right? And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on some of those other aspects of mental health.
Performers and developers, I think, must have a lot more in common than I realized when we started this conversation. When you're giving a performance on stage, you're facilitating an emotional journey for the audience. Real people right in front of you, close enough that you can touch, are going through these emotions. And so you have these emotions with them. And afterwards, this is what catharsis is. You've had an emotional journey where you've laughed and cried, been angry, you've done all those things. But the goal is that you're creating something meaningful. The project where I use this toy, there was no question at all, at any second in the 2 years I was down there, hard work, 18-hour days, 6-day weeks, hard work, uncomfortable work. Never a doubt that we were doing something that was of value to other people. And I've met so many people that have words and images, my likeness tattooed on them, emblazoning on their body the value that it has to them, the ideas that are, there's some good in this world and it's worth fighting for. Tattooed, not all who wander are lost, tattooed on their arm. Like, we knew, I don't know if I knew the tattoo thing, but I kind of did know the tattoo thing, but we knew that this kind of value was being created. And so in a way, we were willing to do more, go further, work harder, try harder, go deeper than we'd ever done on anything I'd ever done on anything in my life before or since. I mean, I couldn't do it now. In my current physical state, I could not physically survive the journey if we did it again, but I would try. I would do it again in a heartbeat because that's what it meant.
All right, Sean. So let's do a lightning round here. I got a bunch of questions that we've received from some folks out there that they want to know, right?
Bring it.
Which Lord of the Rings movie was your favorite to act in?
Return of the King.
Which one was your favorite to watch?
Return of the King.
You have a favorite?
It's a false choice. It was all one movie to us. But anyway, go ahead.
That's right. You were all shooting it all in one fell swoop.
Yep.
Do you have a favorite snack when you're watching a movie?
Milk Duds.
If we asked your family who their favorite character is of yours that you've played, what would they say?
Ooh. Maybe Doug from 50 First Dates.
I heard you on the Michael Rosenbaum podcast talking about Encino Man and how you and Brendan Fraser would go and play video games in between sets or in between cuts. Do you remember what games you played and who won?
I want to say one of the Mario games, one of the first Mario games, and Brendan would have been better than me for sure. He wins an Oscar and he can destroy me in video games. What a life.
In the broader world of games, digital video games or other, do you have a favorite genre of game?
I really like the skirmish mode on real-time strategy games. So you're playing opposite somebody else and you're trying to destroy their base and they're trying to get into your castle and that kind of thing. That's my absolute favorite.
You an iPhone guy or an Android guy?
iPhone.
Do you have any other favorite connected devices?
Garmin watch, which I haven't worn in a while, but the telemetry that's available little piece of equipment. If you're swimming or diving or running or mountaintop or cycling or like whatever you're doing, picking your nose, this thing can give you the absolute, data that you want on it.
Would you rather read a physical book, read a digital book, or watch something on a screen?
I want to say read a physical book, but I never do anymore. I'm always reading in the digital space. And I'm in a grad school, so I'll get textbooks and I want the physical textbook. So I order the textbook and then I spend all the time looking, doing it online. So yeah. But read a book.
One last one for you here. You're at a restaurant and a Rudy chant breaks out. Are you egging them on, feeling it, or you want to throw some food at them?
Well, it depends. Are we like at a TGI Fridays or like a Spago? I think it depends on attire, really. I can picture myself getting up on the chair and doing the Rudy speech in response to that, but I probably shouldn't say that to into a camera where people might test it. I'm always like, the funny thing is, we'll be going through an airport, and I'll look at my wife, and she'll be like, "What?" I was like, "Did you hear that?" She goes, "What?" I was like, "Rudy, they're doing the Rudy." She goes, "No, they're not." I'm like, my wife thinks that I hear the Rudy chant when it's not happening.
And I'll get you out of here on this one. Any last words of wisdom from Samwise that you could share with our audience today, folks that are looking for some parting inspiration from Sean Astin?
Well, first thing I would say is thank you. The work that you do in your with your careers and your work life have animated my life for decades. So thank you for making things easier and possible. Not all products can be perfect, but the product makers are pretty great. So well, since we're talking about mental health, the quote that I'm thinking of is it's like in the great stories, the ones that really mattered, full of darkness and danger they were, and sometimes you didn't want to know the end, because how could the end be happy? How could the world go back to the way it was when so much bad had happened? But in the end, it's only a passing thing, this shadow. Even darkness must pass, and a new day will come, and when the sun shines, it'll shine out the clearer. Those are the stories that stayed with you, that meant something, even if you were too small to understand why. But I think I understand now. Folk in those stories had lots of chances of turning back, only they didn't. They kept going because they were holding on to something. What are we holding on to? That there's some good left in this world, and it's worth fighting for. And then
That's awesome. That's beautiful, and a fitting end for our conversation. Sean, thank you so much for hanging out with us today and sharing your experience and your advice. On behalf of all of us, I'm wishing you and your family a happy and healthy year. Much more career success for you and your studies as well. Good luck.
Yeah. Oh, God.
And we can't wait to see what you do next.
Thank you so much. God bless you all. And much love always.
What